The words I am are the principal name of God. Whenever you say I am, you are declaring the presence of God within yourself, and you are setting the divine law into motion. Nearly a century ago, Emmet Fox recorded this exact metaphysical observation, speaking directly to the silent panic that keeps you awake on nights identical to tonight. You lie there in the dark, watching the cold blue illumination of your smartphone cast shadows across the bedroom ceiling, staring at a credit card statement that feels less like a financial summary and more like an unyielding prison sentence. Or perhaps you feel that dull, heavy pressure behind your forehead after surviving 2 hours of gridlocked highway traffic, mentally rehearsing a difficult confrontation for tomorrow morning, drafting defensive replies to corporate emails you haven't even opened yet. The walls of your daily obligations seem to contract around your sternum, and every primitive nerve in your modern nervous system is shouting at you to fight. Your environment has rigorously trained you to believe that survival requires brute grit, that you must clench your jaw, summon your willpower, and forcefully smash your way through the concrete barriers of your circumstances through pure, agonizing exertion. But the bone-deep weariness pinning your physical frame to your mattress right now is not evidence that you are failing at the battle of existence. It is the absolute symptom of trying to wage a spiritual war with primitive tools. The human intellect, when captured by survival panic, operates under the tragic, exhausting illusion of brute muscular force. You convince yourself that if you run your current crisis through your mind 500 times before midnight, you are somehow performing the responsible work of problem solving. You transform your own internal consciousness into a relentless courtroom where your anxiety acts simultaneously as the prosecutor, the hostile witness, and the presiding judge. In the revolutionary pages Fox compiled during the most turbulent decades of the 20th century, he mapped out an immutable, impersonal law. Your physical reality is nothing more than the printed receipt of your inner equivalent. Whenever you utter the phrases, I am exhausted, I am broke, or I am trapped, you are not describing your circumstances. You are actively commanding the creative machinery of the universe to manufacture those exact conditions. You are pouring your sacred divine vitality directly into the mold of your own terror. You cannot clear the darkness out of a room by beating the air with a stick. You simply switch on the lamp, and the darkness, possessing no independent reality of its own, instantly vanishes. Your agonizing struggle to fix your life by sheer muscular will is precisely what holds your deadbolts locked. Picture an old master clockmaker working in a dim, dusty shop in the cobblestone alleys of London during the bitter, freezing winter of 1930. On his workbench lies the intricate brass movement of a grandfather clock that has suddenly stopped ticking. If that craftsman takes a pair of heavy iron pliers and forcefully yanks on the delicate escapement wheel, using all the strength in his forearms to compel the pendulum to swing, he will achieve only one mathematical result. He will strip the fragile gears and permanently destroy the mechanism. The machinery will remain stubbornly dead, mocking his frantic haste. But the master artisan does not waste a single drop of sweat fighting the mechanical resistance of the brass. He simply sets his tools down, takes a single drop of refined oil, and applies it silently to the central mainspring. He does not scream at the clock to tick. He merely aligns the primary source of power and allows the stored energy to distribute itself through the wheels. Without a single decibel of noise, without a shred of violence, the heavy pendulum catches the rhythm, swinging back and forth in perfect, dignified cadence. That very same mechanism that resisted his brute physical strength a moment ago now operates with absolute precision, yielding to the effortless physics of its original design. As your eyes continue to track whatever is right in front of you, or as your physical frame rests in whatever posture it happens to occupy at this exact second, simply notice the residual tension stored across your collarbones. Do not attempt to forcefully relax your muscles. Just passively observe how many hours you have spent this week acting like that frantic, ignorant clockmaker, trying to force the jammed gears of your material circumstances to move through sheer emotional strain, demanding that external bank accounts change, that stubborn people change, that past mistakes rewrite themselves through the friction of your worry. Without shifting your physical position by a single millimeter, recognize the profound, silent relief that floods your chest the instant you accept that you do not have to fix the world tonight. Your sole responsibility is not to pry the bent gears of your reality straight, but to drop your attention quietly into the central mainspring of your consciousness, allowing the original principle of life to resume its natural rhythm. Yet, there is a dangerous psychological trap that captures the vast majority of people the very first time they attempt to step away from the workbench and claim this creative principle. When they try to shift their mental equivalent and declare their divine identity, they commit a subtle technical error, a misstep that instantly converts their attempt at spiritual empowerment into a brand new fuel for their own panic. The exact anatomy of this invisible self-sabotage is what we will dismantle next. Stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. This is the complete rule, and if only you will do this, the trouble, whatever it is, will presently disappear. In his 1934 foundational treatise, The Golden Key, Emmet Fox documented this exact law of mental conduct, speaking directly to the silent panic that grips your chest on nights identical to tonight. You lie there in the dark, watching the cold illumination of your smartphone cast pale shadows across the bedroom walls, staring at a banking statement that feels less like a summary of expenses and more like a permanent sentence. Or perhaps you feel that dull, heavy throbbing behind your forehead after surviving 2 hours of slow-moving highway traffic, mentally rehearsing a confrontational dialogue for tomorrow morning, drafting defensive replies to corporate emails you haven't even opened yet. The walls of your daily schedule seem to contract around your sternum, and every primitive nerve in your modern nervous system is screaming at you to fight. Your environment has rigorously trained you to believe that survival requires brute grit, that you must clench your jaw, summon your willpower, and forcefully smash your way through the concrete barriers of your circumstances through pure, agonizing exertion. But the bone-deep weariness pinning your physical frame to your mattress right now is not evidence that you are failing at the battle of existence. It is the absolute symptom of trying to wage a spiritual war with primitive tools. The human intellect, when captured by survival panic, operates under the tragic, exhausting illusion of brute muscular force. You convince yourself that if you run your current crisis through your mind 500 times before midnight, you are somehow performing the responsible work of problem solving. You transform your own internal consciousness into a relentless courtroom where your mounting anxiety acts simultaneously as the prosecutor, the hostile witness, and the presiding judge. In the revolutionary pages Fox compiled during the most turbulent decades of the 20th century, he mapped out an immutable, impersonal law. Your physical reality is nothing more than the printed receipt of your inner equivalent. Whenever you fiercely contemplate the sheer size of your debt, the injustice of your workplace, or the loneliness of your apartment, you are actively commanding the creative machinery of the universe to manufacture those exact conditions. You are pouring your sacred divine vitality directly into the mold of your own terror. You cannot clear the darkness out of a room by beating the air with a wooden stick. You simply switch on the lamp, and the darkness, possessing no independent reality of its own, instantly vanishes. Your agonizing struggle to fix your life by sheer muscular will is precisely what holds your deadbolts locked. Consider the silent, uncompromising physics of a massive hydroelectric dam constructed across a turbulent mountain river. Behind that curving wall of reinforced concrete, millions of tons of dark, heavy water press furiously against the barrier, constantly seeking an avenue of escape. Imagine an exhausted, panicked novice engineer standing at the base of that structure in the dead of night, terrified by the crushing weight of the reservoir looming above him. In his absolute terror, he grabs a metal bucket and attempts to bail the water out from the spillway, hurling cupfuls of liquid into the darkness with aching, trembling arms. Or worse, He presses his own fragile shoulders directly against the weeping micro-fissures in the concrete, genuinely praying that his physical muscles can somehow hold back the crushing weight of an entire lake. His agony is entirely genuine. His exhaustion is absolute, but his methodology is profoundly absurd. The river does not negotiate with human sweat. Now observe the quiet mathematical efficiency of the dam's true release mechanism. Deep inside the subterranean bedrock, far below the churning surface of the flood, sits a small, perfectly balanced hydraulic valve. It requires no muscular strain, no screaming effort, no violence whatsoever. When the master engineer simply turns that small dial with a gentle, effortless motion of his wrist, an invisible shift occurs inside the pressurized chambers. The immense, crushing weight of the reservoir is instantly redirected into the heavy turbine blades. That very same mass of water that threatened to obliterate the concrete wall only a moment ago is suddenly converted into pure, illuminating electrical power, lighting up 1 million homes across an entire metropolis. The water was never the enemy. The direction of its flow was the only issue. As your physical frame continues to bear the quiet weight of your daily routine at this exact second, whether your hands are currently gripping a steering wheel, folding laundry, or whether your spine is supported entirely motionless by the mattress beneath you, simply notice where the weight of your attention is anchored. Do not attempt to forcefully quiet your thoughts or wrestle your anxiety into submission. Just passively observe how you have spent the last several days acting like that panicked engineer, pressing your fragile nervous system against the crushing wall of your circumstances, trying to hold back the flood of life with your bare hands. Without altering your physical posture by a single fraction of an inch, recognize the profound mechanical truth. Your willpower is fundamentally inadequate to hold back the river, and it was never designed to do so. Your only function is to step away from the concrete wall and turn the valve of your attention away from the flood, directing your mental equivalent toward the absolute source of power. Yet, there is a dangerous psychological trap that captures the vast majority of people the very first time they attempt to execute this mental pivot and apply the golden key. When they try to forcefully detach their gaze from the problem, they commit a subtle technical error, a misstep that instantly converts their attempt at spiritual alignment into a brand new fuel for their own panic. The exact anatomy of this invisible self-sabotage is what we will dismantle next. When you resist a difficulty, you are feeding it. Anything to which you give your attention, you are feeding with your own life and substance. The absolute warnings set down by Emmet Fox in his foundational manual of mental conduct are the exact reflection of what happens to your nervous system on those sleepless, dead-of-night hours when rest refuses to arrive. You toss upon your mattress, reach out into the dark to check the glowing digital display of your smartphone, and realize there are only 3 hours left before your morning alarm sounds. Instantly, a familiar suffocating wave of heat creeps up through your sternum. You mentally calculate the exhaustion you will inevitably face in tomorrow morning's corporate meeting, anticipate the slow-moving gridlock of the highway, and begin to wage a furious internal warfare against your own insomnia. You forcefully command yourself to sleep. You squeeze your eyelids shut with aching intensity. You frantically count your breaths like a desperate infantryman pinned down in a muddy trench. And the harder you fight to shut down your brain, the more hyper-alert, electrically charged, and agonizingly awake you remain. You convince yourself that this bone-deep weariness is the tragic fault of a ruthless modern world demanding too much of your flesh, entirely failing to realize that your exhaustion is manufactured by your active resistance against what you cannot physically control. The subconscious architecture does not process commands of negation. It operates as an uncompromising mathematical recording engine of magnetic resonance. When you spend your afternoon vigilantly policing your mounting anxiety in a desperate attempt to annihilate it, or when you spend weeks mentally prosecuting an old financial injustice to assign blame, You are operating at maximum horsepower in precisely the wrong direction. You are pouring your sacred vitality directly into the mold of your own scarcity. In his lectures across the turbulent 20th century, Fox repeatedly cautioned that trying to eradicate a dark mental habit through sheer brute force of will is the spiritual equivalent of trying to hold down a compressed steel spring with your bare thumbs. You may keep it pinned to the floorboards for a few exhausting minutes through immense muscular strain, but the very millisecond your fatigue overcomes you, the spring rebounds with triple its original velocity. True metaphysical liberation demands no sweat, no gritting of teeth, and zero combat. It requires the cold, scientific application of the law of substitution. You do not wrestle with the shadows. You simply pivot the lens of your attention, allowing the lower frequency to wither away from pure starvation. Revisit for a brief moment an old, fading scene archived somewhere in the dusty basement of your memory. You were perhaps 9 or 10 years old. It was a late Sunday afternoon, and you were sitting on your bedroom carpet, struggling with a complex mechanical puzzle or a plastic building set that stubbornly refused to fit together. You tried one piece, you forced another, jamming the sharp plastic edges against the base with mounting, breathless panic. Your small fingers began to ache, your breathing turned shallow and erratic, and a bitter, suffocating sense of cosmic injustice took root in your stomach. It felt as though that inanimate object was actively mocking you, deliberately conspiring to expose your personal inadequacy. You gripped the piece with all the helpless fury of your 10 years until the plastic bent, snapped, or shattered in your palms. You sat there weeping from sheer frustration, certain that the surrounding universe was fundamentally cold, hostile, and uncompromising. The piece did not yield to your rage, and the broken toy remained scattered across the floor as a permanent monument to your frantic haste. As your physical frame continues to bear the quiet weight of your daily routine at this exact second, or as your attention passively drifts across the room you currently occupy, simply notice the striking resemblance between that frustrated child on the bedroom carpet and the modern adult you are today. Without altering your breathing pattern and without attempting to fix a single broken element of your current life right now, observe how you are still gripping the shattered pieces of your relationships, your career, and your finances, trying to jam them into the puzzle board of your reality through emotional violence and mental exhaustion. Notice the immediate, quiet wave of relief that washes down your spine the instant you understand that you do not have to force those pieces together tonight. You have the cosmic permission to drop the broken toy onto the floor, stand up, and look out the window, allowing your mind to rest in the mathematical certainty that the natural order of the universe does not depend on your strained, anxious manipulation. Yet, there is a profound metaphysical error that the vast majority of people make when they finally drop the broken piece and attempt to claim their creative authority. When they attempt to step into the silent realm of scientific prayer, they commit a subtle miscalculation of mental alignment that secretly converts their very attempt at peaceful surrender into a high-octane fuel for their own terror. The precise mechanical anatomy of this invisible self-sabotage is what we will dismantle next. Scientific prayer is not an appeal for mercy sent to a distant sovereign. It is the scientific attunement of the human mind with the infinite source of all life. You hear this precise clinical definition today while staring at the exhausted reflection of your own face in the dark computer screen you just shut down, or while the monotonous hum of your refrigerator cuts through the silence of your kitchen at 2 in the morning. You have just completed that crushing modern ritual. You opened your banking application, watched numbers that seemed to systematically shrink with every passing week, calculated the rising price of basic groceries, remembered tomorrow's rent, and in the absolute peak of silent despair, you whispered an internal sentence that begins with the word please. You attempted to negotiate with existence. You promised to be more disciplined. You promised to work double shifts. You begged for a miracle, asking for nothing more than a temporary reprieve from the crushing physical weight resting upon your sternum. And when the quiet darkness of the early morning answered with absolutely nothing except the mechanical ticking of a wall clock or the distant sound of tires passing on wet asphalt, you concluded that you are profoundly alone. But the tragedy of your sleepless night is not the absence of a divine response. It is the fact that you are attempting to operate the most sophisticated machinery in the universe, like an exhausted laborer trying to force open a digital vault using a rusted crowbar. The modern human nervous system has been rigorously conditioned to believe that agonized supplication is the highest demonstration of faith, when, in the impassable mathematical mechanics of the cosmos, it is the ultimate declaration of absolute disbelief. When you desperately plead for a financial debt to vanish or for an emotional agony to cease, your subconscious mind, which fundamentally does not understand human vocabulary but registers only the magnetic frequency of your emotional state, records one single incontestable piece of data. We are in mortal danger. We do not possess this. And because the subconscious architecture operates strictly under the non-negotiable law of the mental equivalent, it takes that agonized feeling of scarcity and ruthlessly multiplies it across your physical experience with mathematical precision. You truly believe you are praying for a release, but you are actively carving the walls of your own prison with greater detail. In his revolutionary treatises, Emmet Fox repeatedly cautioned that the universe is not a vain monarch who requires the flattery of human tears. It is an infinite electrical circuit. You cannot illuminate a dark room by weeping in front of an empty wall socket, begging the electricity to take pity on your darkness. You simply insert the plug with absolute, unshakable authority, and the current flows by sheer mathematical necessity. Step back in time and stand upon a frozen sidewalk in Manhattan during the bitter, unforgiving winter of 1932. The biting winds off the Hudson River swept through the concrete canyons of a New York City entirely devastated by the Great Depression. Men who only months earlier had worn tailored silk suits and commanded vast corporate empires now stood in bread lines stretching for miles beneath falling snow, waiting for a single cup of thin broth and a piece of stale bread. Absolute panic was the very respiration of the metropolis. Ruined investors leapt from skyscraper windows, banks shuttered their iron gates overnight to lock away the life savings of entire generations, and a heavy, suffocating collective certainty that the civilized world had permanently ended impregnated the concrete. Yet every single Wednesday afternoon, a massive crowd of more than 5,000 human beings completely ignored the bread lines and pressed shoulder to shoulder along 6th Avenue to pack inside the monumental New York Hippodrome. That cavernous theater was filled to capacity with hollow-eyed men and women wearing patched wool coats. They did not gather there to receive physical charity. Standing in the dead center of the stage, illuminated by a single spotlight, was a quiet Irish engineer, Emmet Fox. While the newspapers sold on the street corners outside screamed of economic apocalypse, that master did not offer cheap, sentimental consolation to the bankrupt masses. He looked out over 5,000 human beings who had lost absolutely everything in the material world and said, "Your external poverty is not a reality of the financial markets. It is an optical illusion fixed upon the screen of your consciousness." Fox rigorously instructed ruined stockbrokers and starving factory laborers to practice scientific prayer right inside the epicenter of the economic collapse. He strictly forbade them from asking God to fix the broken economy of Wall Street. Instead, he trained them to completely shut the doors of their physical senses and sustain, for 5 disciplined minutes every day, the internal equivalent of absolute divine opulence, operating with the cold, detached emotional control of a laboratory chemist. Historical records document the unthinkable. Hundreds of those destitute men and women who ceased begging the universe for rescue and systematically realigned their inner mental machinery walked out of that theater and completely rebuilt vast enterprises from nothing, while those who merely wept and pleaded sank into the abyss of the crisis. as your physical frame continues to navigate the quiet demands of this exact moment. Whether your hands are casually resting upon a steering wheel, folding laundry, or whether your spine is supported by the mattress beneath you, simply observe the underlying frequency of your internal dialogue over the last 48 hours. Without judging your character and without attempting to forcefully alter your breathing pattern right now, passively observe how many times you have caught yourself acting like a spiritual beggar, knocking on the door of tomorrow with bruised knuckles, pleading for external circumstances to be gentle with your flesh. Without shifting your physical posture by a single fraction of an inch, recognize the staggering wave of metaphysical dignity that expands inside your chest the instant you permanently resign from the role of a beggar. You do not need to request permission to exist in peace. The electrical current is already running through the walls of the universe. Your only task is to stop weeping over the frayed wire and simply connect your attention to the absolute source. Yet there is a fierce, almost invisible biological and spiritual rebound that occurs inside the human system during the first few days after an individual establishes this correct connection, a defensive purge from the subconscious architecture that frequently causes the physical world to appear even more chaotic and hostile immediately following your alignment. Knowing how to remain perfectly motionless through this brief, turbulent night of matter is the absolute dividing line between those who successfully rewrite their material destiny and those who crawl back into their familiar panic. The exact mechanics of this temporary desert and how to survive it without lifting a finger is what we will examine next